So I just saw the new Apes film, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and I have plenty of thoughts here to discuss with you all. So let's get into it. So as you probably know, this is the fourth in this reboot saga of the Planet of the Apes universe. We started off with Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, War for the Planet of the Apes, and now Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. This one is a little bit different though, as the trilogy beforehand focused on Caesar, who, as we all know, if you've followed these films, is an excellent character. One that was so compelling to follow through his trilogy, and what this series of films discussed was always so interesting, and I felt like it wrapped up in a really satisfying way. Although I do think War for the Planet of the Apes might be my least favorite in the trilogy, I still really liked it. So I actually wasn't excited for this new movie at all, because we are done with this trilogy. The character is done. They had a very definitive ending, as you know if you've seen that movie. And I wasn't all that interested in continuing on hundreds of years later. To me, it felt like a weird excuse to just reboot this series and try to make some money again. And it almost convinced me of that, to be honest with you. I may have the hot take here because a lot of people are really positive towards this movie, but I did not really enjoy this movie as much as I would have liked, and I don't think it holds a candle to the other three films, and I have to make that comparison because they have made this the fourth film in this saga. So of course, it is directly linked to those movies, and they have said that they're going to make 9 of these movies, so 5 more Apes movies. And after this one, I don't want to see another one. I think I have had enough. I made that risk of seeing this fourth one to see, okay, people are talking about this in a positive sense. Let's check it out. Let's give it a chance. And it did not convince me that I need to see any more. I was very happy with Caesar's trilogy being exactly what it is and wrapping up there. Now, before you just start thinking that I'm just a fanboy of this trilogy and don't want to see any more, as I said, there's plenty of merit to this fourth one. There are ideas here that I think are worthy of exploring. For example, this being so far after what happened with Caesar and all the apes that he knew. We are now in a world where he has become more of a myth or a legend, and I actually like the way they approach that. He kind of feels similar to Apes Jesus in a way, where some people believe in what he says, some people don't, some people twist what he says for their own gain, and some people take what he said on face value and try to use his words as a positive thing, which, as we know, if we've seen the trilogy, we know that Caesar was a good ape who had compassion for humans as well as his apes, and was a fierce and strong leader. As I said, such a compelling and interesting character. But those characters aren't in this anymore. We now have a completely new set of characters, and not a single one of them managed to live up to any of the characters in the trilogy to me. Even though some of them were solid, I do think Noah, the protagonist, is decent enough. He does have some layers to him, and the dynamic that he has with the human character was quite fascinating. I liked seeing that relationship progress, and I liked seeing where it ended up by the final act of this movie and the way that it twists and turns. I think that was a brilliant choice that worked to the benefit of the movie. Of course, the visual effects in this movie, like the other 3 movies, is terrific. I mean, the way that these apes look, it just looks insanely real, and the fact that most of this is in daylight, incredible. We're not hiding anything here because it's so quality. I would not be surprised if this gets an Academy Award nomination for visual effects because they are that good. Taking away all the flaws that I have with this movie, if we're just looking at the visual effects alone, it is one of the best movies of the year, hands down. Giving a little bit more of a justification though as to why I don't love this as much as other people is the narrative. I think that it doesn't really add anything new. This is the longest Apes movie in this saga so far, and I think it says the least amount of things. Everything that he is saying, I have heard in the trilogy communicated way better. I mean, all of that same stuff is there. We have flipped it a little bit where the apes are now really advanced and the humans have become more primitive. I get all that, but it was kind of angling that way by the end of the original trilogy anyway, so why do we need to keep saying the same things? We're at the 4th movie now and we're trying to launch another 5. We need to start introducing something new or saying the same thing in a new and interesting way. Just making it the complete opposite doesn't justify that to me. I do think that the whole concept of will the humans and the apes coexist has been a question that has been prevalent all throughout these movies. And as I said, brilliantly communicated in the first 3. I think it did everything it needed to do. I did not need any more to be explored in those dynamics. I think Dawn of the Planet of the Apes was the best example of that, where there was this fragile tension between the apes and the humans. Caesar really wants to trust them, but he keeps being let down constantly. And then you see all of this disruption between the apes themselves. I thought that was handled brilliantly. And then you see a continuation of that in War for the Planet of the Apes. So in Kingdom, we're just getting a little bit more of that. It kind of feels derivative of what Dawn and War did, but just not as well executed. We do have this disruption between the apes, and that is interesting, especially the ones that are following Caesar and taking his words in very different ways. I do think that's all fascinating, and some of these characters are interesting, but this dynamic between the humans and the apes doesn't really add anything new into this film, which makes it hard for it to justify its existence when the other 3 films that this is linked to communicate that much better. I also think this has major pacing issues. As I said, I think it says the least out of all of these Apes movies, and it's the longest, and I really felt that runtime here. I was consistently bored in this movie. I just was not interested in what was going on a lot of the time. I thought the first act in particular was really dull. It does pick up a little bit when we get some pretty interesting characters and we start hearing more about this mythology. And the third act is fine enough. There is some tension there, but it is so prolonged. And I was kind of done with it by the end. I didn't think the villain was extremely compelling. He did have his moments, but it just doesn't work for me like I really wanted it to. And honestly, when we start getting these teasers by the end of this movie, I started feeling some of this kind of unfold in a way that I didn't really like. I kind of felt like it starts bringing up questions that if we really take them seriously and look at it properly and not give it just a pass, I think this thing just falls apart pretty quickly. I obviously cannot talk about that without spoiling it because it's huge. It's the final moments in this movie. But as I said, some of the questions that it does ask by the end of the movie, the dynamics between some of the characters is fascinating enough. And while I don't think that any of these new characters live up to any of the original characters in that trilogy, they do a good enough job. If we just look at it for what it is and just by itself, they're fine. But it still doesn't make this an enjoyable movie for me overall, I'm afraid. I just don't think it was all that interesting. I don't think what it has to say is that interesting. I just think it's so safe and just wants to do as much as possible to not toe any lines or try anything new, different, and exciting. And that kind of safe filmmaking really frustrates me. I like it when films take risks. Not silly risks, ones that work, of course, but this just doesn't want to do any of that to me. I think it just wants to rely so heavily on what was there previously. And if I wanted to watch those movies, I'll go and watch those movies. I own all of them. This one, why do I want to watch this? It just doesn't add anything new. When I rewatch these movies in the future, because I definitely will, I don't want to watch Kingdom. The trilogy, as I said, ended so perfectly, and it's a problem that I have with Hollywood in just trying to revitalize these franchises that had concluded. Stop doing it. It's so annoying. I just think that there's just so much that you could have done with this. I do like these movies, and that's why I am quite passionate about it and want to see them succeed. But this just did not do it. Technically, I even think it's a little bit less than those movies as well. I don't think the cinematography as good. Matt Reeves' direction in those last 2 movies, Dawn and War, was sorely missed here. And you can just tell the style is not there. The amazing close-ups and cinematography that he utilized, and kind of illustrating the nature that has kind of taken over this world just had so much atmosphere. The forest in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is filled with this atmosphere and tension at times, and I really loved that. And in this, it has none of that. It just feels so fake, which is crazy because I know that they filmed in a lot of real world locations, and in terms of trying to be practical, you do see some effort there. I understand the beach setting that they arrive at is very pretty, so I do give props there. Some excellent production value in those moments. But in terms of the forest and things like that, to me it just lacked all sense of atmosphere, and this world had no intrigue in this movie. I don't want to watch another one, and I just can't really recommend this one unless you just really want some more apes in your life. This might be for you. Some people do like it, so credit where credit is due. I guess it has pleased a lot of people, but for me, this just doesn't work as much as I would have liked. As a score, I'm going to give Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes a 2.5 out of 5. I just think this thing is so mediocre whole way around, apart from the visual effects, which are outstanding. There are some moments where you feel like it's trying, but the talent is just not there anymore. The story was concluded, so there's really nowhere to pick this up and continue on from without it feeling forced, and that's what it did to me. It just lacked a lot. And those are my thoughts towards Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Let me know what you think about this movie in the comments below. I know I'm in the minority here, so I'd love for you to tell me how I might be wrong here. I want to be on the side of liking this movie, but it just doesn't do it for me. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. I have got memberships active now, so if you're interested, please head down below and see the plenty of perks that you can receive in the tiers. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.